That may be the greatest catch I've ever seen in my life.
Okay, we had some crazy games today. We have a lot to talk about. We're going to go through, and I know this video is titled Top 10 Lessons Learned from Week 5, but I have way more than that. We have some lessons that I had to throw in at the end of the video just because, I mean, there were too many that we have to cover, so make sure you stick to the end. But of course, you know exactly what we have to do before we dive into these top 10 lessons. I have to go through and pull up our most recent winners for a Fantasy Flock Network hat. If you are subscribed to the channel, every time you leave a like on the video and leave a comment down in the comment section, you get entered in for your chance to win a Fantasy Flock Network hat. We're giving way too many of these away. I mean, we're giving an absurd amount. And our first one going over to Flock, who says, let's secure W's tomorrow, Flock. Yeah, yes, sir. I think that based on what a lot of people have been telling me on Patreon, I think that people have crushed it this week so far. And then our next one coming out from Joey, who says, happy early birthday. The best present I can give you is you giving me a hat. Thank you so much for the wonderful present, my friend. I'd be happy to go through and send you a Fantasy Flock Network hat. Just make sure you go through and send me an email with your physical address if you won that hat. That way I can get that shipped out to you ASAP. And of course, I mean, go down there, drop a like, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel. It helps us out. And let's dive right into it. Let's keep this intro brief. And yeah, let's first bring up what we're going to have with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And that it looks like our first lesson learned may be that Chase Claypool is indeed not dead. Looks like Chase Claypool is someone you can go through and you can start where working his way back from this injury. I mean, y'all know coming back and him being active this week, what was one thing that I was saying a lot in the live streams? We were saying that Davante Johnson was no longer in that top tier wide receivers for us based on the fact that Chase Claypool would be coming in. And while we weren't projecting Chase Claypool, I mean, to be the wide receiver one here at all, I was saying not to start Chase Claypool. I still thought it meant that you couldn't really just assume that Davante Johnson was in the same tier as someone like AJ Brown, was in the same tier of someone like Mike Williams. Well, surprising to see that Claypool only had 36 snaps coming back from his injury here. But with those 36 snaps, he actually had 6 targets. I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but the efficiency through the roof. 5 receptions, 130 yards, and a touchdown to go along with it. I mean, you know Claypool. I mean, we saw this his rookie season. He is the big play machine. And I think now going back into a week where he should be healthier, he could be seeing more snaps played in week 6. Also, Juju Smith-Schuster injures his shoulder. So even though Davante Johnson came out, Davante Johnson, I mean, if you're just looking at the box score, you would assume that maybe he got hurt here. I mean, he only had 2 targets this game, which is not characteristic at all for Davante Johnson. Well, he didn't get hurt, played all 60 snaps, and I'll say, I mean, here with Davante Johnson, you're still going to be playing him next week regardless with no Juju Smith-Schuster, but I think the first lesson learned is Claypool is now playable. And now let's go over to our next lesson. It's going to be over in Jacksonville. And then it does not matter if Carlos Hyde is going to be active here. James Robinson is going to see the majority of the work to the point where he's a must-start running back every single week. I mean, he comes out, he plays 46 out of 71 snaps this week. And we were telling Robinson owners to play him everywhere, mainly based on the idea that this was a great matchup against the Tennessee Titans. I mean, the Titans we have seen before, they can allow a significant amount of points. I mean, they made Zach Wilson look good in week 4. Well, James Robinson comes out. He actually gets 18 out of the 23 backfield carries, which is a higher percentage than he was accounting for before the Carlos Hyde injury. But I guess maybe now Urban Meyer is kind of figuring out that James Robinson is the lead running back here, and Carlos Hyde should have his role shrink. And with these 18 carries, James Robinson did James Robinson things where he came out, he had 149 rushing yards. He had a rushing touchdown to go along with it. Now, I will say you're not going to be expecting this elite level of production every single week. One thing I really want to take note of is the fact that he only had 1 target out of the backfield this week. But, I mean, it's not like any other running back took that passing down role. I mean, maybe just the way the Tennessee Titans defense was run wasn't a spot that Trevor Lawrence was looking to check down consistently for James Robinson. So yeah, Robinson, must-start player every single week. Looks like Urban Meyer is finally getting smart enough to realize that Carlos Hyde should be on the bench a little bit more. Now, our next lesson learned is maybe we can get some redemption. Now, y'all know I was telling you at the 3rd pick overall, I mean, the majority of the offseason, we were saying this until we knew Jameis Winston was starting in New Orleans. Then we switched it to Alvin Kamara. But we were significantly higher on Davante Adams than anybody else here. I mean, with Davante Adams, this is a player that we discussed this so much this offseason. But in 2020, he had the best wide receiver season of all time from a points per game standpoint. And I mean, Of course, you weren't necessarily expecting that to keep up its main rate. I mean, here he had over a touchdown a game back in 2020. Of course, that wasn't going to happen again, but still a player that had access to an elite level ceiling and that elite level floor. He comes out, he puts up a very typical Davante Adams game. Keep in mind, this game went to overtime, but the majority of this production came in regulation, where he had 16 targets, 11 receptions, 206 receiving yards, and a receiving touchdown to go along with it. Now, Davante Adams, through 5 games, has had 61 targets so far this season. The volume is there, and honestly, with Adams, knowing the historical rates that we have seen for his touchdown efficiency, I would expect that he's going to start scoring more touchdowns soon if he's still getting this amount of targets per game. Oh my God, Davante Adams, all those Davante Adams team I have on Underdog, I mean, it looks like we're going to win a lot of money with Adams this year. Now, our next player is going to be actually a pair of teammates, and this will be in Cincinnati, and the situation is, doesn't matter if T. Higgins is active, doesn't matter if T. Higgins is inactive. Jamar Chase is a stud alpha level wide receiver that you have to start every single week. Jamar Chase coming out, getting 6 receptions. I mean, 6 receptions. You go, okay, well, that's not necessarily that great, not necessarily a lot of volume. 159 receiving yards and a receiving touchdown to go along with it. This is exactly what we have seen from Jamar Chase almost every single week this year, where he comes out, he doesn't command a lot of volume. You know, those are wide receivers that we're generally trying to avoid, the guys that have the elite level of efficiency that are going to be a little more up and down. But somehow, some way, I guess Jamar Chase, I mean, truly was that elite level wide receiver prospect he was sold to be coming into the NFL. I mean, this is someone that even with T. Higgins being active, finds a way to rush with almost 30 fantasy points. Yes, it was a plus matchup. And yes, you're going to be starting Jamar Chase every single week going forward. And another thing I want to point out here is that you actually had T. Higgins not playing his usual percentage of snaps. He only played 47 snaps in this game. Keep in mind, this went to overtime. I mean, Jamar Chase played 61 snaps. Tyler Boyd did play more. I'm not going to be assuming that this is the situation going forward. So I actually think that we want to be continuing to try to sell Tyler Boyd where we can, because I'd imagine that, I mean, T. Higgins is going to go right back up there with Jamar Chase for the amount of snaps that they're going to be playing in this offense. And Higgins was able to command a significant amount of snaps on these targets. I think Higgins will 100% be on our buy low wide receiver video this week, where he actually had 8 targets with only 47 snaps played. So when he was on the field, he was running routes, he was getting targeted at a heavy rate. So yeah, Higgins going to be a buy low. I actually think you probably want to start both of these wide receivers every week. Now, our next lesson learned is, it looks like if Calvin Ridley is out for a game, everybody in Atlanta is going to crush. I mean, we had Kyle Pitts on our buy low wide receiver video. Even though he's a tight end, we had to include him because he was a perfect buy low candidate over the past 2 weeks now. Kyle Pitts comes out, 54 snaps played, but more importantly, he has 10 targets in this offense. With those 10 targets, he has 9 receptions, 119 receiving yards, and a touchdown to go along with it. I mean, the volume was there. The efficiency was there. He looked fantastic. Now, yes, it was a plus matchup. And yes, Calvin Ridley was not in this offense. So with Kyle Pitts, you're going to be expecting this to trend in the opposite direction going forward. Like, I'd be very surprised if Kyle Pitts continued to see 10 targets a game. But I mean, he had 9 targets a game back in week 4. So now all of a sudden, you're just looking at this player and you're saying, well, he is probably exactly what he was sold to be. He's probably the tight end 4 in fantasy. And when I was screaming that everybody needed to be taking TJ Hawkinson over him, I honestly don't even feel bad because we were able to buy him at a cheaper price over the past 2 weeks. Kyle Pitts looks like he's that bona fide stud now. And Cordell Patterson also continuing to expand his role in this offense. I mean, with Cordell Patterson, we knew that he only played 23 snaps back in week 4. Now, I do have to admit that with Cordell Patterson here, I mean, you can maybe explain away the bump up in his usage with no Calvin Ridley in this offense, that they were needing another offensive weapon. I mean, that's kind of what we said going into the week. As soon as Calvin Ridley was ruled out for this game due to personal issues, I actually came out and I said, no, I know Cordell Patterson's a sell high player for us. We're waiting a week though. You got to wait a week. We got to play him this one more week, knowing that his value will continue to rise. And yeah, I mean, with those 46 snaps played, he actually ran 24 routes. He had 8 targets out of this backfield, and he had 1 more carry than Mike Davis at the same time with 14 to compare to 13. So Cordell Patterson going into a bye week, still think I'm going to be looking to sell him. But I mean, if you do keep him on your roster, he's a must-start running back for you every single week now. Now, our next lesson learned, it looks like Alvin Kamara is going to do Alvin Kamara things. I mean, especially with the injuries to the other running backs in the backfield. I mean, he comes out, he plays 49 out of 56 snaps. This is like the highest snap rate you've ever had from Alvin Kamara in his career. And he comes and also sees 16 carries out of the backfield, 71 yards, a rushing touchdown at the same time. And with Kamara, I mean, I really hope that you bought low last week. I kind of included him in the buy low running back video saying, of course, you're going to have to pay a premium, but it's worth it with Kamara here. I mean, people were panicking just slightly given the fact that Taysom Hill back in week 4 was getting a large role in the red zone. And to go along with this, Alvin Kamara had a total of 0 targets out of the backfield. But we looked at the routes run. We identified the fact that Alvin Kamara was seeing his usual routes run in this offense. And this was going to be a spot where you're expecting a bounce back in his receiving game usage. And yeah, he had 5 receptions, 51 receiving yards, and a receiving touchdown as well. And over the next few weeks, I mean, we may consider putting Alvin Kamara at the running back 1 spot in fantasy because Taysom Hill, I mean, I did not get to watch this game, but reports are saying he got carted off with a concussion. So that's 100% going to be something we're having to research more throughout the week. We're having to go through and monitor what exactly this concussion meant, how bad the hit was. I didn't have a chance to see it, really hoping the best for Taysom Hill. But obviously, if Hill's not in this offense, that's a great thing for Alvin Kamara, as you would expect. This would be a spot where all of a sudden he is just seeing a significant bump up with his touchdown opportunities. Now, our next lesson learned is this Chargers offense is pretty damn good. Justin Herbert coming out, throwing for almost 400 yards, 29 rushing yards added on. So, I mean, he got to 400 total yards, his 5 total touchdowns. He props up Austin Ekeler. I believe Ekeler is the running back 2 so far in the season. I think Derrick Henry is still right ahead of him. But, I mean, Austin Ekeler doing his best Alvin Kamara impression where he comes out. He has 5 receptions himself. I mean, he also gets 53 receiving yards, a receiving touchdown, and added on in the rushing department, he has 17 carries, 66 rushing yards, 2 rushing touchdowns. So clearly he has that role at the goal line. And that's what a lot of people were worried about as well with Austin Ekeler here. So fantastic news for Ekeler, fantastic news for anybody who drafted him. I mean, it looks like he could easily be a top 3 running back rest of season. Now, our next lesson learned is, dear Lord, Mike Williams, the wide receiver 1. I mean, despite this being a very tough matchup, Mike Williams comes out 16 targets in this game, 8 receptions, 165 receiving yards, and 2 receiving touchdowns at the same time. Right now, Mike Williams is the wide receiver 3 in fantasy. I believe he's only behind Tyreek Hill and Davante Adams. This is a spot where now we have to be going and moving Mike Williams ahead of Keenan Allen in our rest of season rankings. We're going to be ranking him ahead of Allen every week. Probably going to be I don't want to say a top 5 wide receiver in our rankings this upcoming week, but definitely in the top 10. We actually had him as a must-start guy this past week. We had him as a high-end wide receiver too, but clearly that's not putting nearly enough respect on his name. Now, our next lesson learned is with Trey Lance. Looks like we may not get Trey Lance as this long-term option that we were hoping for. Now, with Lance, y'all know I loved him coming into the season as we were looking at him. And what was the thesis with Lance? Is that I'm not an NFL scout. I'm not trying to sit here and tell you that I know 100% sure that Trey Lance is going to be a better NFL quarterback than Justin Fields. But from a fantasy football perspective, Trey Lance will be a cheat code in fantasy football based on a few things here. A, based on the team investment, indicating that Kyle Shanahan clearly believes in Trey Lance. B, based on the situation he was stepping into with the best tight end from a blocking standpoint and with his receiving ability added on in the NFL. Also, having Deebo Samuel to go along with this. Deebo Samuel's looked fantastic, especially with his yards after the catch ability so far this season. Going into this week, he had like 500 total yards in 4 weeks only. And Brandon Ayuk, someone that we thought was going to be a significant player, I guess he is not. And Trey Lance comes out. I'll say, I think we were proved right about a couple things here. Trey Lance, he had 16 rushes for 89 rushing yards. So he didn't come away with the touchdown this week. But still, based off this rushing volume, like, let's just do some math here. I know Trey Lance was very disappointing. He didn't even get to 200 passing yards. But if you're just looking at how fantasy football points are scored, this is literally a cheat code. We talk about this all the time. And that you're looking at Trey Lance, just say we get 90 rushing yards here. That's equivalent to 9 fantasy points. I mean, how many passing yards is 1 fantasy point? That's 25 passing yards for 1 fantasy point. So all of a sudden you're getting an additional 225 passing yards added on just from the capability that Trey Lance has on the ground with his legs. Now, if we would have seen a rushing touchdown here, that would have been a major bonus. And what did we say going into this week as well? I mean, at the beginning of the week, I was telling everybody to start Trey Lance with aggression. I was telling them to start Trey Lance over someone like Joe Burrow. I was telling them to start Trey Lance over someone like Matthew Stafford when we were getting these questions on Monday and Tuesday. And then by the time we had George Kittle placed on the short-term IR, we were saying, well, one of the main reasons we were so excited about Trey Lance is no longer there, and that his best offensive weapon in George Kittle. I think that if you're asking Kyle Shanahan, if you're asking anybody on the 49ers outside of the quarterback position, who's the most fundamental piece in that offense for San Francisco, everybody there would be in agreement that it's George Kittle from what he provides both to the run blocking game as well as the overall passing game. Once he was ruled out, we just had to say, okay, well, this is going to be a much worse spot for Trey Lance. They'll have a much harder time moving the ball down the field, picking up first downs, having red zone opportunities. That came true. So with Lance, I don't want to say you can go through and cut him, but I believe they have a bye this week, and Jimmy Garoppolo should be back from the calf injury by then. And I would assume, based on his performance, 0 passing touchdowns, 0 touchdowns overall, an interception at the same time, and not even 200 passing yards. While he had a great day from a fantasy football standpoint, from a real life NFL standpoint, I mean, not encouraging. I'd imagine that you're getting Jimmy Garoppolo to slide back in as the starting quarterback here for the 49ers. I mean, even if I'm the biggest Trey Lance fanboy in the world, that we can kind of see that coming. So maybe it's time to go through and drop Trey Lance in the shallow formats, just because, I mean, if we're not going to have him for another few more weeks, like, what are we waiting for? I think that we probably have to just cut, move on, possibly go to the waiver wire and pick someone up like Cadarius Toney. Cadarius Toney coming out and showing everybody in the fantasy football community that they had no idea what they were talking about evaluating Cadarius Toney coming into the NFL. Because despite any metrics you look at, Cadarius Toney is clearly showing that it's going to be a rookie wide receiver breakout where he comes and he dominates against the Dallas Cowboys. And I have to give a massive apology. We had a lot of people out in the live stream on Sunday morning, Saturday night, Friday night. You know, we live stream every single day. And they were asking, Mason, hear me out on this one. I know I don't necessarily make a lot of sense when I'm saying this, but I mean, Dallas is very bad against the wide receiver position. Kadarius Toney looked really good this past week. Kenny Golladay is being shadowed by Trayvon Diggs. Can we start Kadarius Toney? And I was going, no, you know what? It's kind of like Rondale Moore back in week 3. Everybody wanted to start Rondale Moore with Kadarius Toney. I mean, Daniel Jones had over 400 passing yards in week 4, and that was really skewing a lot of the perception on what we were going to have from this overall offense. I was saying to fade Kadarius Toney, but now he is probably a must-start player, especially knowing that Sterling Shepard, Darius Slayton, they were not close to returning in this game. They're going to have to get rushed back because Kenny Golladay suffers a knee injury against the Dallas Cowboys now. And obviously Saquon Barkley most likely missing this next week with his ankle injury at the same time. Tomorrow morning, we'll have a waiver wire running back video coming out talking about someone like Devontae Booker. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel for that. And yeah, here with Kadarius Toney, if we have no Slayton, no Golladay, no Shepard, no Barkley, oh my gosh, this is going to be a wide receiver pretty much being the main driver of the football in this New York offense. I'll say the Giants probably are going to have one of the worst offenses, if not the worst offense in the NFL, if we have no Barkley, Golladay, Shepard, Slayton. But still, I mean, Toney will be pretty much the Brandon Cooks player in a really bad offense, driving everything. He looks fantastic in the open field. I honestly can't wait to go and pull up that game again just to watch some Kadarius Toney highlights. Now, our last lesson learned is Myles Gaskin is not dead. I mean, another thing that I have to apologize for is I was coming out on the live streams when people were saying, oh, Mason, can I start Myles Gaskin? I was going, starting Myles Gaskin. He's the backup running back for the Miami Dolphins. I mean, he's not even the backup running back just for your fantasy team. He's a handcuff level running back at this point where, I mean, Malcolm Brown had an absurd amount of snaps in week 4. Malcolm Brown was definitely the starting running back. He was the feature running back in week 4, and Myles Gaskin was just fully on the bench. I mean, that just completely changed this week. They get the better player on the field, where Myles Gaskin does play 37 out of 54 snaps, and he actually had 10 targets in this offense. I mean, he had a great fantasy day. All of it was through the air because, of course, he's not going to have a great day on the ground. I mean, you can never play a running back going up against Tampa Bay, knowing that Tampa Bay does have the best run defense in the entire NFL, and they're going to be able to put up points at will. So it's going to be a situation that's going to be really hard for you to go through and play any running back against the Buccaneers. But still, I mean, with 10 targets, he had 10 receptions, 74 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns. A fantastic day from Gaskin. I'm not starting Gaskin going into week 6. I haven't even looked at the matchup yet, but I mean, it's just too up and down with the usage. Also, Jacoby Brissett just looks way too bad. But if we get Tua back and we see another week in a row of Myles Gaskin being the feature running back for Miami, then I think you could consider starting Myles Gaskin. Now, thank you. I really hope you all enjoyed this video. Please make sure you go down there, drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment to get entered in to win a Fantasy Flock Network hat. And yeah, that's all I got for y'all. I really hope y'all enjoyed the video, and I really hope I see y'all out with the video tomorrow morning where we will be talking waiver wire running backs. And we'll be live streaming every single night this week as well. So make sure you hit the bell next to the subscribe button if you want to come out to that. And yeah, that's all I got for y'all. Have a great day.